Negative 150 degrees Celsius. That's the number at the end. That's what's coming. And from the first minute of Frostpunk, you know it. Not because the game tells you, but because everything you're looking at is already fighting against it. Every building, every law, every decision you're about to make exists inside that number. Frostpunk is a 2018 city builder survival game from 11-bit Studios, the Polish team behind This War of Mine. On the surface, a resource management game. You build, you research, you keep people warm. But underneath that interface is something the studio has been making in different forms since 2014, a machine for producing moral discomfort, a system specifically designed to make you feel the weight of decision most games let you make for free. I found this game during winter. Playing in a cold room, I genuinely could not tell for a while how much of what I was experiencing was the game and how much was the temperature. That line between the screen and the room is exactly where Frostpunk does its best work. The question it's asking isn't whether you can build fast enough. It's something quieter and considerably more uncomfortable. It wants to know what you're worth. Hold that thought. I'll come back to that. 11-bit Studios was founded in Warsaw in 2010. Before Frostpunk, they made This War of Mine, a survival game played from the perspective of civilians in a besieged city, not soldiers. University lecturers requested it for ethics courses. It was the rare game that understood difficulty not as a difficulty setting, but as a moral position. Frostpunk came out of that same philosophy. The first prototype was called Industrial, a steampunk city builder without a message. And after This War of Mine, 11-bit didn't want to make a game without one, so they built one around a single image, a generator. One heat source in an impossible freeze. Victorian technology pushed to its limit in an alternate history where the Industrial Revolution met a world-ending winter. A civilization advanced enough to build automatons, reduced to arguing about whether children should carry coal. That contradiction, technological abundance and civilizational desperation in the same frame, is not an aesthetic choice. It's the thesis made physical. You are not managing a city. You are managing what remains of a society after everything it built failed to save it. The game sold 250,000 copies in the first 3 days. It won awards. It sparked debate in China, where some players found the endgame question, was it worth it? Not rhetorical at all, but pointed and political in ways that landed differently depending on where they were standing. That's the world we're walking into, and that question, the one I asked you to hold, is the one that the game is built to answer. The skeleton. Frostpunk gives you a generator, a circle of frozen ground, and somewhere between 80 and 100 survivors. You have coal to burn, wood and steel to build with, and temperature that drops in stages. You build outwards from the heat. You research technology to sustain the warmth. You send scouts into the frost for resources and other survivors. Standard city builder architecture until you open the Book of Laws. The Book of Laws is the game's real engine. A branching decision tree where you pass legislation that shapes how your society functions. Some laws are practical, extended work shifts, emergency medical protocols, resource rationing. Others require more from you. Child labor, fighting pits, secret police. Here's what makes this design mature. The game shows you exactly what each law does before you sign it, not after, before. Child labor increases your workforce and raises discontent by a specific amount. The fighting pit, where citizens redirect their frustration by watching each other, costs you something the interface describes in plain terms. Every one of these presented in the same neutral layout, same font, same calm description of consequences. Let me walk you through how this actually plays out, because the abstract description doesn't capture it. It's day 6. You have 112 citizens. The temperature's dropped overnight and is projected to drop again in 3 days. Your coal stockpile covers 4 days at current generator heat. You have 17 sick workers taking up medical bay beds, which you need for the scouting party coming back tomorrow. And you have children, around 30 of them. The child labor law has been sitting in the Book of Laws since the start. You've been managing without it, but right now, the math is different. 30 more workers change the coal extraction rate, changes it enough. So you open the law, you read it. You already know what it says. The discontent increase is listed. The workforce increase is listed. The game is not hiding anything from you. And you make a decision. The game doesn't punish you immediately. Discontent ticks up slightly. A notification arrives. Some citizens are unhappy about this. The children report to work. The coal numbers improve. The city continues. What you just did has been quietly filed away. The game will present it back to you at the end, with full information, no ambiguity without what happened and why. Now watch what those mechanics become when a player is actually inside them. The game runs on two emotional bars, hope and discontent. Hope measures your people's belief in the future. Discontent measures their anger at you. Both can end your run. Max out discontent, they exile you. Drain hope to zero, and they collapse into despair and stop functioning entirely. The developers researched this with genuine seriousness. They read survival literature, mountain climbing expeditions, account of people stranded in extreme conditions, historical records of communities under siege. What they found across all of it was consistent. People don't survive on resources alone. They survive on the belief that surviving means something, that there is a future worth reaching. Deprive people of that belief, and the resources stop mattering. So 11-bit made hope mechanical. They gave it a bar. They made it something you manage and optimize alongside coal and food and building materials. And in doing that, in reducing the most essentially human thing to a number on an interface, the game makes its first quiet argument about what leadership at scale actually requires. The final storm. Every playthrough of Frostpunk's main scenario builds towards it. A temperature drop so severe that most buildings stop functioning. Food production freezes, and all you can do is burn coal and wait. The first time it hit, I remember the notifications cascading, building offline, workers sick, resources depleted, and genuinely not knowing second by second whether I was going to make it through. This is a city builder, a genre designed to feel like God mode management. And here it was, producing something a food critic might recognize as the full experience of a dish arriving exactly right. Not just the individual elements in isolation, but the texture, the temperature, the precise moment of arrival, the way it changes as you sit with it. The game had constructed something that registered in the body, not just the mind. That's the aesthetic register Frostpunk operates in. The sound design layers wind and machinery and notification chimes in a way that builds genuine pressure without a single moment of artificial drama. The circular city design means you always see how much warmth isn't reaching the edges. The temperature gauge is always there, always dropping, never lying to you about where this is going. And underneath all of it, the warmth you built yourself that requires constant maintenance, that you knew was temporary. There is a feeling 11-bit studios earn through design rather than sentiment. The coziness of being inside a car during a storm, safe right now, aware of what's outside, aware that at some point you'll have to face it again. That specific quality of relief, warmth that feels precious precisely because you understand the cost of it, is the game's signature aesthetic. You earn the coziness. That's why it means something. That's why it hurts more when it's threatened. Underneath all of that is the question you've been holding since Act 1. What exactly are you worth? Here's what most conversations about Frostpunk miss. It's not a game about becoming a monster. It's a game about finding out whether you already were one, and how much cold it took you to find out. Because the laws don't force you. The game is winnable, genuinely, completely winnable, without crossing into authoritarianism, without child labor, without propaganda, without secret police. It's harder. It requires more careful play, more foresight, more willingness to accept inefficiency in the name of something you've decided matters. But it's possible. The game knows it's possible. The final summary screen reflects exactly what you chose. There's no grade hidden from you, no score normalized against other players, just a record of your decisions, presented back without comment. And if you do cross the line, if you follow the authoritarian path all the way to its end, the game offers you not one destination but two completely different flavors of the same choice. The order path takes you towards a militarized state, curfew, surveillance, a fighting pit as a pressure valve, eventually a secret police force. The logic is rational and cold. Control produces stability. Stability produces survival. The aesthetic is industrial, gray, efficient. Citizens follow orders because the alternative has been made clear. The faith path takes you somewhere stranger. You build shrines, you appoint a prophet, you replace civic authority with religious certainty. The generator as a sacred object, survival as a divine mandate, the leader as high priest of an emergency theology. The aesthetic is warmer, almost communal. Citizens believe rather than comply. The difference in how it feels to play is significant. The game knows that. It's not neutral between these two endpoints. It's showing you that authoritarianism has a texture, and that texture matters, and that you chose the one that fits your instincts. What the game is actually measuring, across all of this, across every path, is your price. At what temperature does your ethics become negotiable? For some player, it's day 2. For others, it's never. Most land somewhere in the middle, and the middle is where the design is most honest, because that's where you find yourself making a decision you didn't anticipate, under pressure you didn't manufacture, for reasons that genuinely made sense at the time. The full information design is what makes this mature as a piece of work. This isn't a game that catches you after the fact and says, look what you did. Frostpunk tells you in advance. It says, this is what child labor means. This is what fighting pits cost. And then it gets colder, and it waits. What I found across every version of the game I played, the conservative, the totalitarian, the cult leader, the leader who held the line, is that some decisions were genuinely difficult to make, even knowing it was a game. Not because they were mechanically hard, but because the interface is so calm, so neutral, so matter-of-fact about what you're authorizing. And some parts of your brain registers that calmness as permission. That's the game working exactly as designed. But there's something else happening. Something that sits outside of the category of the game design and closer to what you might call a character study. Because Frostpunk, stripped of its genre, is essentially a structured test of values under controlled pressure. The code is variable, your decisions are the data, and the results tell you something that most people only find out about themselves in circumstances nobody would choose. People will say they made certain decisions just to finish the game, just to get to the end. That might be true. But what you're willing to do to reach a goal, even for a fictional one, with no real consequences, is not nothing. It's information. Frostpunk just happens to be an unusually well-designed instrument for collecting it. The honest counter-argument has 2 parts. The first is structural. Frostpunk's endless mode eventually loses its edge. Once you've measured the systems, the pressure that creates the moral weight dissipates. Without the pressure, the laws stop feeling like decisions. They become options. The first playthrough is the only time the game can genuinely find out what you're made of, because it's the only time you don't already know the answer. The second is mechanical, and it's worth being precise about. The hope and discontent system is a more interesting concept than it is a system. The idea of operationalizing belief, of making hope something you manage like coal. It's genuinely ambitious, but in practice, particularly on the faith path, it can reduce to a maintenance routine. You remember to click the sermons button, the bar clears, the city continues. The depth the system promises isn't always the depth it delivers. What works is the way it interlocks with the laws. The real texture lives there, in the decisions that move the bars, not in the bars themselves. The bars are the scoreboard, the laws are the game. And Frostpunk 2, which I haven't played yet, though it's on the list, tried to scale all of this up to a larger, more macro-level city management. The community's response was notably more muted than the originals. I can't speak on what was lost from personal experience, but the signals from other players who loved the first game is consistent. Something about the intimacy didn't survive the translation upwards. The small society whose individual complaints arrived as name notifications. The specific weight of a community whose faces you almost knew. That may simply be something that doesn't scale. If it's true, it's its own form of evidence about what the original was actually doing. The city survived. That's the first thing the game tells you. And then it asks the question it earned the right to ask through every temperature drop, every law, every notification chime, every decision you made with full information and made anyway. Was it worth it? What Frostpunk left behind for games that came after is harder to quantify than a mechanic. It demonstrated that a city builder, a genre associated with detachment, with bird's eye abstraction, with efficiency over feeling, could be a moral instrument, that the management layer and the human layer didn't have to be separated, that you could make someone feel the weight of a decision by making it make sense in the spreadsheet and in the stomach simultaneously. This war of mine did it with individual survival. Frostpunk scaled it to leadership, and what it found across all of those playthroughs, all of those players, all of those temperatures, is that the line isn't where most of us think it is. It moves. It moves with the cold. It moves with the clock. It moves with the cost of coal and the number of sick workers and how many days you have until the next drop. The name, Frostpunk. Before you've played a single hour, it gives you an atmosphere you've never experienced but somehow recognize. Something industrial and desperate and Victorian and impossible. Something that promises grimness, and underneath it, something like warmth. And the specific warmth you have to earn. I found this game during the winter, in a cold room, at a time when I needed something that asked hard questions without pretending the answers were simple. Not every game finds you in that right moment. This one certainly did. The city survived, but I still think about whether it was worth it.